For middle-class white women, especially in the North, what we see is more time. The leisure class had more time to question their separate spheres, their discontent, and they participated as active consumers. So more time came because there's, improved technologies, especially in the wealthier neighborhoods, water, sewer lines, indoor plumbing, running water, the help of cheap domestic servants to help in the home. They have refrigerators and city conveniences, bakeries, laundries, canned foods that all made being a modern housewife more convenient in some ways. Women are being looked at as the main consumers in this new age. Marketing techniques for companies are targeting women because they know they are making this they have the buying power in the families. New department stores are springing up in the cities. Catalogs are being sent to people in more rural areas so they could buy and keep up with the trends that are really emerging in women's fashion as well during this time. We see women's magazines, like this picture here from the Ladies' Home Journal, coming about, talking about, entertaining, being a good mother, right, what to read, things like that, that they think are going to interest these women who, supposedly have more time on their hands. We also see the birth rate declining. On average for white women in 1850, they're having 5.42 children. 40 years later, by 1890, they're having 3.87 children, right? Between 3 and 4 children. So again, they're going to have more time to devote to the family, to their children, to the home, to leisure activities like reform, club work, charitable, benevolent societies. We are also seeing women's sexuality become more somewhat normative, at least from the medical clinical side, right? For women who are married, that pleasure can be kind of thought of as something that could be mutually exclusive between a husband and a wife, which is kind of really coming away from the Victorian ideas that women need to be completely sort of unsexual to keep up this image of being pious and virtuous. We're also seeing, with the growth of urbanization, more homosocial, as historians kind of have termed it, relations between women, especially in cities where you see more young women and also young men congregating in work and clubs and reform, greater subcultures of a gay and lesbian society starting to emerge, even though they were not or would not have referred to themselves as gay, as we would kind of impart our modern terminology. For club women, this was a form of sort of leisure that was seen as more acceptable, more conservative than other reform movements like the suffrage or, the temperance movement. Club women tended to focus on cultural or literary events. In a lot of ways, these clubs helped to meet the growing intellectual needs of women that had, have these really kind of boisterous educations and, college educations. And, now they're expected to just be mothers and wives, and they don't necessarily get to flex that mind muscle, so to speak. So these women tended to be drawn from, like backgrounds, especially race and religion. And they have sort of a complex relation to the suffrage movement. Some supported it, some didn't. Black women's clubs tended to embrace it more fully because a lot more Black women were working and saw the need for, um, you know, political leverage, being a part of the democratic process to improve their economic place in the world, right? If they're going to get better wages, well, they need to maybe have a say in voting in the people that are deciding these things. We also see groups like the YWCA, the Young Women's Christian Association, come about that facilitated or helped with the movement of young women from rural areas to the city to find work, whether it's secretary or factory work. They become sort of these advocates for women who are really trying to make it, take a new path in life in the working world. And so more middle class elite women are providing their assistance to these young working and sometimes poor women. This time period is also sometimes known as the Women's Era. I love this quote from the Boston Transcript. Woman is straying from her sphere, right? There's a lot of concern that the Victorian model, the separate sphere ideology, is really being turned on its head in this time. We see a lot of expansion of reform through prison reform, educational reform, medical reform. Women really are involving themselves in these different areas of social concern that really goes in line with the rise in urbanization. But one of the most prominent reform groups of this time was the Women's Christian Temperance Union, which was founded by Frances Willard in 1874. That's her on the bike there. And the temperance movement really aimed at first focusing on individuals' relationship with alcohol, right? Trying to just be sober, but it eventually kind of rolls out into targeting the liquor industries and trying to abolish the sale and consumption of alcohol completely. So it's something that really kind of snowballs over time. But the Temperance Union was seen as a women's crusade. Willard was famous for saying that it's women's duty to protect the home by reforming the law to criminalize drinking. So she's really fusing the public and private concerns and really announcing that it's women's place to be concerned about these public laws and that it's women's place to do something about it, which was seen as quite radical, right? Women are going into saloons and smashing bottles and rioting in a lot of ways. They're singing and praying and destroying property, and this is radical stuff. This is not quote unquote proper womanly behavior for this time period, but they see it as their duty. They see it as their kind of maternal maybe instinct to protect these families who are being ravaged economically, physically by the effects of alcohol as they see it. So this is a quite radical organization that also wanted other areas of reform and supported the suffrage movement. By 1890, we're really starting to see these new notions about womanhood coming into fruition. New womanhood, as it's being titled, being labeled, is starting to replace the Victorian model of what it means to be a good, true woman, right? So new womanhood is replacing true womanhood. And I think Charlotte Perkins Gilman kind of helps to illustrate what this looks like as best as we can, right? Women are pushing the boundaries to participate in the public sphere and demanding it and really seeing it as their place. Gilman criticized women who only devoted their whole lives to motherhood and their family, right? She saw that women had a duty beyond the home, beyond their children, and really emphasized the need for women to realize their individual strengths that they could offer the world. And I think this is pretty new. This is pretty progressive to see women as individuals rather than being kind of grouped as these maternal biological entities. One last thing. We're seeing that the Victorian ideology is still in its place, right? There's still this notion that women have a duty to be mothers and to have families. The idea of not getting married is still pretty rare, though it did exist. But we're also seeing that women are sort of fusing these maternal duties with public policies and really opening up new paths, creating new paths for themselves in areas of reform in society.